Hello, I'm Michael Wybrow, and in this video I'm going to give you an introduction to mobile app design and iOS design. So let's start with mobile application design. When we're designing for mobile interfaces and mobile devices, there are a range of challenges that are different to the design of desktop apps. A couple of examples of these are the fact that we have a limited screen size for mobile devices, and this means you have to make important choices about which information you display primarily and which information you have to drill down to find. So this means thinking about the navigation of your app and what things you present on screen and how much space you dedicate to them. We need to think about how to make our interfaces usable and clear. You're not going to have things like tooltips. You'll have button images, sometimes not accompanied by labels. As a result, you need to have very clear icons and use consistent controls that are going to be familiar to people on the platform, and make use of standard conventions for interaction. And of course, if you're designing for devices of different sizes and different size classes, including iPads, then you need to think about how your apps translate to those different sizes. And have a think about the apps that you enjoy using and the ones that frustrate you. Think about apps where you do the same action and each time it takes you 5 steps to do. Could that action be done with 1 step? So a lot of this is about understanding the actions that your users are likely to perform most frequently and which ones they're likely to perform less frequently. Also, you need to pay attention to the conventions of the platform. So iOS, as a mobile platform, has its own interface design and recommendations and interaction techniques. And if you design your app for one platform, it's not necessarily going to work well on another. So an iOS app is not going to translate well to Android. And as part of this, you want to be a good citizen and fit in with the platform. So this means making use of standard icons, navigation, interaction techniques, visual style, as much as possible conforming to the platform conventions. And the benefit of doing this is that users will immediately know how to use your app because it will be familiar to them. And in this design process, which you'll need for your assignments, we follow Apple's Human Interface Guidelines, which is a great document that outlines a lot of the recommendations that you would need in this space. Before we have a look at that, let's talk about iOS design in general. So the first thing I want to talk about is skeuomorphism. The original iOS design made heavy use of skeuomorphism. So what is skeuomorphism? Basically, it's the concept of designing interfaces that are similar to real life interfaces or devices. So an example, a very simple example, would be something like a button, and a button has looks like a button because it looks like a button has the affordance that you can press it or tap it to gain an effect. Another example would be a slider, like many old stereo devices would have had. If you see a slider, like for a volume control, it suggests how it can be used. So there are benefits to skeuomorphism, but I'd say the original iOS design took this really far. So in this case, we've got a bookcase that looks like a wooden bookcase, and the fact it's a wooden bookcase doesn't really provide any more insight into how to interact with it. In fact, there might be limitations, like a physical bookshelf obviously doesn't scroll, whereas I guess this interface did scroll when you had more than one screen worth of books there. So there are issues with skeuomorphism in that it adds a lot of visual noise to an interface. And as a result, or due to this I should say, iOS design and Android design has kind of moved on from this onto the sort of flat design that we see now, where there's much more emphasis on content, especially the use of images, colors to provide subtle highlights of information. And you can see basically what's shown here is that it's what you're currently reading, current and recent books, the amount that you've the amount that you are in through reading each of the books. So that's the important information, and it's displayed prominently and given sort of space relative to its importance. Here's some other examples of the sort of change between skeuomorphism and post the sort of flat design that came as a result of iOS 7. You can see just like lots of use of borders and heavy shadows, and a lot of these have gone away. For example, like table views, often you would have shadows that would suggest that content could slide under a bar or something. Now we get transparency of the bar to show that content can move under. So there's things that are still hinted at in the interface but are done in different ways. And you can see something like the compass, which looked like a physical compass, now just shows the relevant information that we would read off of a compass. And shows additional information too, that so you need not be limited by the display of what a physical object might show to you. I want to mention some more recent iOS design changes, because a lot of these happened a long time ago, and it's worth saying there's been an evolution. Even all the versions between, say, iOS 7 and iOS 13 over the last sort of 6 or 7 years have updated this flat design style and revised it. Some of the more recent things that have happened in iOS design are dark mode. We now have a system dark mode, and it's supported by all the system apps. And if you write an app, it should be supported by your app. So we're going to talk about and see how we can make use of dark mode. And mostly we get this for free, but if we customize our app with colors and other styling, we need to be aware of it. So that's important. Some other things that should play into your designs. Apple have been pushing something called SF symbols. San Francisco is their font, so SF symbols is I think SF is San Francisco. This is a large amount of pre-created button icons that are used throughout the standard iOS system apps, but also they're suggested for your use where possible. And in the workshop, I'll demo an app, or the SF Symbols app that you can download from the developer site, and you can browse these images, and they're very easy to use within Xcode. Context menus. iOS apps didn't used to have context menus, but now do. Part of this is the fact that we have Catalyst now, which allows iOS apps to run under macOS. And we also have some iPads with cursor support, and we're moving to a model where there's a sort of blurring between, say, desktop apps and mobile apps. And modality, which is sort of a way of presenting view controllers, where you have a view controller that is not just pushed above another on a navigation stack, but is shown modally above other view controllers, and therefore sort of partially obscures it until it's not needed anymore, and then it can be pulled away to reveal the content underneath. So the last thing I want to mention here is the human interface guidelines, and you should spend some serious time having a read of the HIG. It is really well written and very easy and accessible and easy to understand, and it really outlines best practices in terms of interface design. After you've read it, you'll probably find you can pick out apps that you know and use that don't follow the HIG in various places, and sometimes that's warranted and sometimes it's not. So that's sort of what this point about it being recommendations are. You can break away from them, but you should be able to explain why you're doing that. So we can bring it up and have a quick look at this. So this is the the HIG, it's all online. It starts off talking about iOS design themes and particular sort of principles, so say consistency, use of direct manipulation and feedback, metaphors and user control, and it works through various things like, okay, we could have a look at interface essentials. It talks about bars, tell people where they are in the app, provide navigation, may contain buttons, views, the primary content, enable behavior such as scrolling, insertion, deletion, arrangement, controls that convey information, buttons, switches, text fields, progress indicators. And I mean, you can click on any of these and it's going to go through a set of things like buttons, system buttons, which we made use of for, say, like an add system button. There's advice here like use title case for titles, keep titles short, use verbs. Detail disclosure buttons, so we're going to cover table views in week 3, and disclosure buttons are a standard element that you can display on table view cells where you can reveal additional information. So yeah, reading through here is going to give you a lot more information about what's sort of possible and what good practice is. So that was some controls. Okay, thanks for watching.